A digital forensics investigator's goal is to find as much information about the attack and the attacker as possible. The goal of the attacker is to gain access to sensitive information for either personal or financial gain. There are many challenges associated with dealing with a cyber incident regardless of time, location, or country. One of the biggest legal challenges regarding cyber attacks in foreign countries is determining what law to follow. Many different countries share the same legal construct, but many vary in how the law is imposed. If a system is owned by the United States government but operates on a New Zealand network, each country would seek to enforce their cyber attack policy. In this instance, because the exposed data is on a New Zealand's network, those are the laws that have to be followed. Another challenge that may arise is acquiring the evidence as a forensic investigator. This may be challenging because this could involve cooperation with other forensic investigators in another country. Digital forensic investigators also need to know what laws and policies he or she will be following for their investigation, which could potentially pose another challenge. If the investigator does not follow the correct policy, she or he risks evidence being thrown out during court proceedings. E-discovery or electronic discovery is the evidence collected and used in litigation and court proceedings. Given that New Zealand's policy on data protection is governed by the Privacy Act of 1993, there should be no internal laws that should affect e-discovery. If data is being protected on a server or system in New Zealand, then those are the laws that will be adhered to. The process for obtaining said evidence requires a warrant to be obtained prior to acquiring the evidence. Again, depending where the evidence is located in reference to the originating country, it may require working with the digital forensic investigators of the partnering country to avoid breaking laws in place. Retrieving evidence from a cloud service provider can be challenging. Like previously mentioned, research on which country owns the cloud can be a daunting task. If the attack happened in Australia, but the cloud service provider is in New Zealand, one would assume that New Zealand's policy is followed. This may or may not be the case. As mentioned previously, New Zealand's data protection laws fall under the Privacy Act of 1993. The Privacy Act applies to agencies within the country and electronic and manual data obtained. There were two different cyber attacks that occurred during the Global Economic Summit. The alliance called Five Eyes consists of 5 countries that have agreed to collect, analyze, and share signal intelligence with each other. Due to New Zealand and the United Kingdom, which is the summit host country, being 2 of the countries that have formed the alliance with 3 other countries, there were no overarching laws and jurisdictions to worry about. Any information or data that was collected during the investigation, New Zealand openly shared collected evidence with the partnering countries. Because these countries have a shared signal intelligence alliance, there are no outlying conflicts with the forensic investigation of this case. Following the incident, New Zealand's forensic team quickly responded, identified the scope of the incident, and provided information along with indicators of compromise to the Chief Information Security Officer and involved stakeholders. The investigation information was then shared with the partnering nations at the summit. In the event a conflict arises during an investigation, mitigation steps would be taken. These steps involve calling a timeout to discuss where the miscommunication is and promptly address it. The country teams would also work together to create a plan of action to prevent any miscommunication in the future. The first step taken to protect U.S. citizens and soil was to disconnect the affected systems from the network. Ransomware has the potential to affect all Summit information systems, which caused some to be concerned. Risks to the countries involved were loss of sensitive information, possible breach of personal user information, and access to all the data on the network shared between the 5 alliance countries. The next protection step is to identify the system in which the attack originated from. Once it was determined that an HR user opened an attachment from what appeared to be a legitimate source, the investigator used Wireshark and Offcrack to determine if any network information had been breached. The attachment contained malware with execution instructions once the attachment was opened. Wireshark was then used to analyze the packet traffic, and it was determined that the malware exploit made a service call to a remote server and then encrypted files on a local system. Offcrack was then used to decrypt the files and restore the data to an operational state. While the attacker has yet to be caught, it has been suspected that it may have been someone at the summit.